Good selection Sunday afternoon, everybody. Rob O'Connor here from RobVinoSports.com with a special NIT rules changes preview. The field of 68 will be set tonight, and then not long after that, those that don't make the tournament may get invited to the NIT, where college basketball will be experimenting with some rule changes this year. To discuss what impact this may have on the lines and totals, we will bring in the founder of Rob Vino Sports, none other than Rob Vino himself. Rob, how are you this afternoon?
Doing good this afternoon, buddy. How about yourself?
Doing very well. Getting closer to the big moment where we'll have the field of 68 revealed, and then not too long after that, those that don't make the big dance may get invited to the NIT, where games will be played on home courts up until the semifinals before they move to Madison Square Garden. And we've got some rule changes this year that the NCAA is going to experiment with in the NIT, and we just want to break them down and talk about what impact they may have on the spread and the totals, more likely on the totals than on the spread.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the rule changes are more inclined to affect the totals, Rob, than they are. But they're more inclined to have odds makers. You know, we've seen NIT rules changes in the past. They were the first to reduce the shot clock, and odds makers reacted over the past couple of years by jacking a few points to the totals, and then bettors reacted the last couple of years by really pounding overs on NIT totals. So it'll be interesting to see. It's almost like college football totals at this point. How much higher can they go? How much higher is the money willing to take these numbers? All of that, obviously, we are here to, as handicappers and bettors, we're here to counterpunch or react to what we see for numbers. It'll be interesting to see where they come out. Some of these changes could affect things.
Well, let's jump into what I think is the biggest one, and that is going from 2 20-minute halves to 4 10-minute quarters. You've seen this in women's college basketball now for a couple of years, where they play the 10-minute quarter. I'm not sure you can really take what they're doing at the women's level and correlate it over to the men's level. It's just such a different game. But you look at the 10-minute quarter and the fact that teams will now shoot foul shots starting with the 15th foul in a quarter. So if you look at the college game now, in the 20-minute half, you go 1 and 1 on fouls, 7, 8, and 9, and then at 10, you get 2 shots. We're doing away with the 1 and 1 altogether. Now it's 2 after 5. Probably a lot less foul shots are going to be shot now, as teams typically don't get into the even 1 and 1 situation until later into the first half. How do you see the amount of foul shots being put up affected by this rule change?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that come to mind for me, Robin. First of all, like you hit on, for any of us that have ever played totals over and dread when a college kid walks to the line in a 1-and-1 situation, we're not going to have that anymore. So I think 2-shot fouls take a lot of pressure off of the kids to make the first, and you will probably, instead of going away empty, you may come away with 1 point at minimum. So that probably is a bonus to as far as adding onto combined point totals. But then, like you say, how fast do you get to 5 fouls? It'll be interesting to see if teams get into this bonus within a 10-minute quarter. As you watch college games now, I think you're right. There's not many times where we see, well, I won't say there's not many, but it's not, I don't think it's better than 50% where we see teams over 5 or at 5 team fouls within the first 10 minutes of a half. So that'll be interesting to see. I think a lot of it depends on how games are officiated, too. So that one's real hard to come up with any concrete theory on how you would play these over or under. But I do think there's one thing that maybe gets a little bit overlooked and we might see a lot of with this new installation of 4 10-minute quarters, and that's the NBA sort of, given theory where coaches go 2 for 1 at the end of quarters. As we watch college basketball now at the end of the first half, they dribble out the half. If there's 34, 35 seconds on the clock, they're going to take all 30 of it off and try and get a shot up with, 6 or 7 and not leave the other team much time for a possession. In the NBA, as we all know, 38 seconds on the clock, teams run up the floor, take first available shot so they can get 2 possessions for 1. I think we might see a lot of coaches go to the NBA style of 2 for 1 possessions, which could lead to more points. So there's a lot to think about here, a lot to digest. But I think overall, this particular rule change probably lends itself to a handful of extra points here, which means odds makers will probably pad totals somewhat, and just knee-jerk reaction, mechanical-type money will play games over. So, again, the position where we're at, on the side of the counter where we stand, you have to counterpunch, you have to react to what we see. It'll be interesting to see where these numbers come out and how high early money is willing to push them.
It will be interesting to see, but the one thing that I think when you look at dribbling out the clock and running out the shot clock at the end of a quarter, as opposed to, let's say, the end of a half, is now you might have more time in the game where there's going to be less shots taken, less opportunity to put points up on the board. I think you have to look at it from that angle as well.
Yeah, and like we say, there's not a lot of, let's say, concrete, like I said before, concrete theories that we can apply to this, because everything is so situational, and we don't know enough about the head coaches in these situations, right, Rob? We've never seen these coaches react. Some may not play the NBA style. Some may continue to play a college style with this. So it's important to know what your head coach is thinking, but how are we going to know that before the game starts, unless, it's another call to the research table. Is basically what I do half my life, is go through newspaper articles and see if you can't find quotes from head coaches who are going to play these NIT games a certain way. Then you can have some sort of definitive idea when you go to play totals. But as we speak right now, as we do this little preview into the NIT rules changes, we really don't know. We don't know which coaches are going to play it NBA style, maybe all of them, maybe half of them, maybe 2/3, 1/3. We really don't know at this point in time.
I mean, that's the thing. When you're going into the unknown, there could be a handicapping advantage, especially on the totals in this situation, one way or another, but it's so hard to put your finger on that advantage when you just are going into the unknown of how a coach is going to handle a game. You almost have to look back and almost go through the play-by-play of these teams to see, okay, when do they hit their fifth foul in the first half? When have they been hitting their fifth foul in the second half? And then it becomes, well, how's the game being officiated? I mean, there's so much you could try and look at to try and figure it out, but we just don't know till it really gets put into practical use on the court.
Yeah, far more the artistic side of handicapping than the scientific side where these rule changes are concerned, because you could sit in a bar room and have two guys take each side of the debate, and clearly you can't say one person's wrong and the other one's right until you see some type of results. Like I say, the best thing I think any of us can do that are going to bet these games is try your best to find some quotes, go to local papers, local beat writers. I'm sure these guys that are covering teams that are going to be entered into the NIT, I'm sure they're going to ask the questions of the head coaches. So we'll see a lot of information over the course of the next, 48 hours as to coaches being questioned on how they're going to play these quarters out. And maybe we'll get some honest answers out of that where we can take certain teams and play them in a direct way. I think that's probably the best path to take at this point in time. It usually is with anything, to see if you can find inside local articles coaches that are willing to admit some stuff or players that are willing to admit some stuff.
And then the other big thing is when you're trying to handicap these games, you still need to factor in everything else on top of these rule changes. You have to look at the motivation of the teams that are playing each other. Is one of them disappointed being the NIT because they thought they should have been in the NCAA tournament? They don't get up for these games. Is one of them a conference champion that was looking at an automatic bid and blew a game in their conference tournament, and now they get sent to the NIT as kind of a consolation? Are they disappointed to be there? So I think there's so much more to look at then you have to focus on these rule changes to an extent, but there's still so much more that goes into handicapping these NIT games.
Yeah, they are, because they're played on home sites as well, so you get teams that let's just use Eastern time, for example, right? Let's say 6:30 Eastern time tonight, Sunday night, you find out you're not in the NCAA tournament and you had aspirations of being in it. 2.5 hours later, you find out you're selected by the NIT, you accept that invitation, and you're picked to travel. Now, the NIT's done a good job with travel over the last few years in regards to how far they send teams. They try to keep it geographical in the first round. They don't want to send a team from the Deep South all the way to the Pacific Northwest first-round games. But they can only do so much with matchups. They try their best. But you're right, Rob. All these little intangibles that you don't find in the NCAA tournament, everybody's going to neutral sites. They're all excited to go to their neutral site. Not everybody's so excited in the NIT. And a lot of times, I think one rule that we could give out from a handicapping standpoint, I've been doing this a lot of years, 1992, 26 years now. I think one thing you can guarantee yourself about NIT favorites or number one or conference champions that didn't make the NCAA tournament, if they get by that first-round game, the site of Madison Square Garden becomes an incentive for a lot of these teams. We've seen it over the years where they just scrape by first round, and then all of a sudden the ball gets rolling and they get stronger as the tournament goes on. So a lot of intricate and additional things to look at when you're handicapping the NIT, certainly far more than there are for NCAA tournament handicaps.
Absolutely. And funny conversation I was having with my wife this morning, who doesn't follow basketball at all except for Villanova, where she went to school. She asked me what NIT tournament is, and I said it's a tournament for teams that don't make the real tournament. She goes, does it stand for not in tournament? I said, no, but that's actually really funny.
Yeah, and now, I don't know, I guess you could come up with full names for the abbreviation CIT and CBI and all the other tournaments that are in effect. I think there's going to be 5. We get that one 16-team tournament back again this year. The Vegas 16 was not played last year, but I think it's going to be played this year. So almost everybody's in one, and we'll see how these matchups line up a little later.
Rob, do you know what are the other tournaments doing? Are they using the NIT experimental rules, or are they playing the regular college rules? I know the last time they experimented with rule changes, the other postseason tournaments also participated in the experiment. Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, we'll have to see how CBI and CIT games are going to be played as far as rules are concerned. I haven't seen anything in print yet or heard anything through television and radio media that says that they're going to follow suit with the NIT this year. But obviously those two tournaments, as you mentioned, Rob, have experimented in the past to try and make their tournaments more appealing to the audience. So we'll see. We'll give those a look. The CBI and CIT will both be announced later tonight as soon as the NIT gets done picking their field. So we'll have all the information a little later on.
Absolutely, and come back to RobVinoSports.com for all of the latest information on all of the postseason tournaments. Just because it's not the big dance doesn't mean there's not an opportunity to make some big money. So be sure to get over to RobVinoSports NITToTotals.com. Rob, let's keep moving and talk about the next big rule change as far as I'm concerned, and that is switching the shot clock from a 30-second clock to a 20-second clock after an offensive rebound. So now you grab the board, the clock starts running from 20 down to 19, and you kick the ball out. You don't have the full 30 seconds now to reset and run your offense. How do you think that will impact things? Obviously, it may lead to a few more possessions throughout the course of a game, as they're not going to be able to do a second possession and kill all 30 seconds, and it'll lead to a few more shots. Other than that, what kind of impact do you think that rule change could have?
Yeah, I think that rule change, Rob, probably is going to apply to late-game situations rather than in-game situations. And when you grab an offensive rebound in-game, first half, second half, a lot of times we see the kids go right back up with the shot. If a guy grabs an offensive rebound and he's in put-back position, he goes right back with it. Sometimes a long rebound comes out and kid hoists an open three right away. But late-game situation where you're ahead by 4 or 5, you're milking a lead late in the game, you grab an offensive rebound and you throw it back outside the three-point arc to take more time off the clock. Now the question becomes, under normal circumstances, we see the team that's trailing run right out to foul because they can't afford to let 30 seconds run off the clock. With it reduced to 20 seconds, in certain situations, do they play it out defensively or do they immediately rush out to foul? If they play it out defensively, obviously that lends itself to more under tendency, less points. If the situation dictates running out and fouling a guy immediately, then you get into that. You and I have talked about this quite a bit. Foul basket, where you can pick up 18, 19 points in the final minute of a game. So time and score is going to dictate a lot of that, but I really think that rule will be applicable late game situations. And the next question from you to me, please don't make it, how do you handicap that? Because you don't. You can't handicap that.
No, it's going to depend on, are you down 3 or are you down 7? How much time is left?
Right.
You just can't get into trying to guess that. And, you can't even really look at the coaches' tendencies now because, they handle it differently all the time. I don't think there's any one coach that says every time I'm down 4 with under 45 seconds left, I start the foul, or there's just nothing really to go off of on there. The only thing that I might be able to say a little bit is if I was going to try and say, well, how do I handicap that and just logically put it through my head, there might be a little less fouling, but at the same time, if you're only at 3 fouls for the quarter, you might go and commit the 4th and then not foul again and play defense just to get your 4th foul so that when the coach says, hey, we need to start putting him at the line, you can go give that 5th foul and not have to waste another 10 or 15 seconds.
Yeah, it's funny, Rob, because when we start to watch these games, as these situations occur, we'll immediately know what the answer is going to be. Oh, he's going to run out and foul. Oh, he's going to play it out defensively. We'll know what the answer is going to be, but trying to get there by betting a game before it even starts, you have no clue. You have no clue what's going to happen at the end. So if you can press buttons fast enough and you're in-game betting, that's probably the best place for you with this rule change. But otherwise, like I say, we know when we're watching the game what the answer is going to be. But to do that ahead of time when you're making your bet, almost impossible. It could work either way. I think right now, the way the rules are set now, it definitely works in favor of totals going higher because as the rule stands right now with the reset to 30 seconds, coaches do just run out and immediately foul. This takes a little bit of that away in some cases, but once again, it's unpredictable. You can't predict it before a game starts.
Let's keep going now. We'll talk about a couple of rule changes that affect the actual court itself. The first one being the moving of the 30-point line back. I think it's going back 1'8", I believe. It's going to match up with the international basketball standard right now. The college is using a shorter three-point line. They're going to back it up. I personally don't think this is going to have a big impact. I mean, where these kids are jacking threes from nowadays, not too many of them are standing right on the line.
Yeah, no, that's true. We see a lot of guys, I think in particular, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, obviously, is Trae Young from Oklahoma. But for anybody who saw Marshall Western Kentucky yesterday, you saw some deep, deep threes from Marshall. And kids have range now, and they shoot from NBA range. I think, part of that, Rob, is due to the fact that opposing coaches defensively, when they face a good three-point shooting team, they extend their defense and try to run people off the three-point line. So it forces you to develop a shot from 3, 4, 5 feet deeper so you can still shoot over top of a defense. Some of that has to do with why we see kids with extended range nowadays. Still, all that being said, if you go around the country and check teams' three-point shooting percentages, they're still not great. There's very few teams that shoot better than 38% from three-point land. And if you're going to add another foot plus to it, it probably knocks it down an extra percentage point or so. Certainly guys get hot for a night. We saw a lot of three-pointers made by Davidson yesterday. I think they made 13 or 14. There's instances where teams do make a lot of shots from distance. But if you're just going to go on average, I think it probably knocks the percentage down a little bit. Not a ton, because like you said, these kids still have deep, deep range nowadays.
And then the other change is widening of the free throw lane from 12 to 16 feet. That takes it up to the NBA match. That's what they use. I mean, there's no illegal defense in college basketball, so you don't have to worry about the defense at 3 seconds. I mean, maybe 1 or 2 more offensive 3-second calls if the kid forgets or whatever the case may be. I mean, I really don't see that having nearly any impact at all on the game's total or any other way.
Yeah, the teams that it might help, Rob, are teams with bigs or frontline players that have scoring ability in close to the basket. It seems to me that now, when you widen the lane, you can fit a couple of guys inside the lane, which draws a lot of defensive attention and opens things up to either a kick out or if you get a one-on-one matchup in there with a really good scoring guy with his back to the basket, gives them a lot of extra room to operate with. So in some instances, but you have to, again, it's situational. You have to know the ins and outs of the team offensively. But I do think if you have a really good scoring low post player, it's a help definitely to teams that can dump down and get their guy in a man-to-man situation with all that room to operate. And I also think that if you can jam enough bodies in there, kickouts would be wide open. 3s, 4 teams with good three-point shooting. So it all depends on the team that's playing, who it's going to help, who it's not going to help. I don't think the 3 seconds, like you say, really comes into play too much. But I do think the operating room helps scoring low-post players, and it also helps drawing a lot of attention and kickouts to guys who can shoot threes.
I mean, the way I look at it is, sure, the wider lane could help them, but even without the wider lane, they could run that kind of offense now if they wanted. It doesn't matter necessarily that the lane is moved out 4 feet. I guess it'll be 2 feet on each side. The bottom line is if the players wanted to use that space right now, they could use that space. They just wouldn't be in the lane using it.
Yeah, now you wonder how it will affect the restricted circle on charges too, Rob. As the lane gets wider, that arc stretches out a little bit. So the charge for referees to be able to see guys who have a foot stuck inside that restricted circle to draw a charge, that will come into play a little bit, I'm sure. But, yeah, again, these are all rules where we know what the end result is. We just don't know how often it'll occur during a game. It's very hard to make these rule changes applicable in all situations. I think you can't make a blanket statement out of any of them. They're all situational once again. I do think that this one potentially could help slow a game down if a team's going to pound the ball inside, or it could add to extra free throws if you're drawing charges. Or add to foul totals, because charges don't put people on the line, but it could add to foul totals. So we'll see. Again, like I say, when we see it, we'll know the end result. But to predict it before the game starts is very, very difficult. These are going to be numbers that, and I'm talking totals here now, these are going to be numbers that we're going to see and react to, but they're going to take a little bit of thought unless, like I say, we have gotten some sort of information out of articles onto how a coach or a team is going to play these games out in the NIT. So it just makes it, for those of us who do this, I think we like the challenge, the mental challenge of trying to figure out which way a game is going to go. And this certainly adds some obstacles to the mental challenge, no doubt about it.
What do you think Vegas does in terms of setting these lines for the NIT? I mean, couple points higher initially? Again, it's all about gathering the information. I'm sure the handicappers or lines makers, are doing everything they can to try and incorporate this stuff. And I know when they did the shot clock from 35 to 30, they obviously set the point total higher. Is it clear and obvious this time as well that the total should be set a little higher?
Well, I think that they will do that, Rob, just in anticipation of money coming in on over. So, for instance, if a game would generally be lined or totaled at 150, we probably now look at 152, 152.5 for an opener, and they'll keep limits low, immediate limits low, like they do on their openers, and see where the money takes it. And they'll adjust quickly. They'll adjust off of $500, not off of $5,000. And, if a series of $500 bets come in, we'll see totals move rapidly off of little money, which they do already. But we're going to see more of that. I just think that odds makers know right off the bat that early money is going to come in on these NIT games to the over. They'll pad the overs. And then we'll see, it's really no different than what you and I have discussed for the last 4 days this week, right? Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in regards to the totals in these conference tournament games. Blindly bet to the under by early money, blindly bet to the under heavily in a lot of instances, to where it just opened up the floodgates for, I don't want to call it stealing, but for real good opportunities on over takebacks in many situations. I know you and I have capitalized on a bunch of them these last 4 days. So that could, these NIT totals could work out the same way as the conference tournament totals have worked out, except that you would maybe looking at playing unders now instead of overs. A game line 150 could go all the way to 59.5, and you say, geez, that's way too high. I'm going to take that under, and you get a good opportunity. So, again, it's a read and react game for the better, and that's what we'll have to do. We'll read and react. We'll see what happens.
Well, Rob, it's going to be really interesting to see who the NIT teams are and what kind of information we can gather, and you'll definitely want to stay with RobVinoSports.com to get all of the latest information and selections, not only on the NIT, but, of course, the NCAA tournament as well. Any final thoughts, Rob, before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, where the NIT is concerned, real quick, Rob, 32-team field, 12 are already in. We've had 12 regular season champs go down in their conference tournaments. By power rating, Middle Tennessee is the highest rated team, so they probably will be the favorite as we speak in this tournament until the next 20 are named. But, that's a lot of teams. You and I talked about potential disappointment for teams that win their regular season and think they're going to make it to the NCAA and don't. There's 12 right there, right off the bat, that, may be disappointed or maybe thrilled just to be going to any tournament. Do the research. It's a time of year where everything's time constrained, and you got to work real hard, real fast. But I think you can pull out some winners. We do it generally every single year, so we'll look to do it again this year.
Absolutely. Remember, RobVinoSports.com for all your handicapping information. Check back later for the Selection Sunday show, which will be posted sometime later this evening after the field has been announced, and we'll be with you nearly every day throughout the tournament as we talk about NIT, NCAA, and some of the lesser tournaments as well. For Rob Vino, I'm Rob O'Connor. We'll catch you real soon. Thanks for listening.